Welcome to our Out of the Desert podcast. My guest today is Bill Miller. Bill's an old friend of mine. You are getting older, Bill, I have to admit it. Well, how long have we known each other? We were at Living Streams together starting when?
1993, I believe.
1993. My
So it's a
goodness.
while ago.
Yes, it is. That is almost 33 years then, right?
Yeah, that's about
33
right.
years.
Yeah,
Um,
crazy.
Yeah, you and Andrea were just having your first child, I think, and you got
Exactly.
4 kids, 3 beautiful boys and an awesome daughter, and you're an attorney. And we're going to talk on today's program about some of the legal messes that Christians get themselves into, what they
Sure.
should do, what they shouldn't do. We're going to talk family, we're going to talk ministry, and all of the above. So, Bill, start by giving us your background. How did you start following Jesus? And where'd you go to school and that sort of thing?
Thank you, Mark. And I promised to cover those topics, but you got to save me 5 minutes because I want your thought on AI and how it's affecting you guys. And maybe I'll pepper a little bit on us, but I really think that would be a lovely 5 minutes if we have the time.
Sure,
Okay, thanks.
definitely.
Appreciate it. So, first of all, I had a chance to look at some of the other podcasts, and they're wonderful. You're doing a great job, and I feel humbled to be involved with that group that's been on there.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've got a natural gift to get stuff out of people. I met the Lord in 1972 based on my sister's conversion, more or less through Young Life. And then she had introduced Mom and Dad to the gospel and the clarity of the scriptures. We had grown up staunch Catholics and to some degree still have a deep love for the church. But when Mom and Dad got saved and born again, Dad quit drinking and smoking the same night. He gave his heart to the Lord. So it was a really good testimony because he was an old school Midwest guy. You'd drink every day and, all that stuff. But so it all went away right away. And so more or less grew up in Greater Phoenix. I was born in Marin County, not far from your old haunt. And I think we were on Sir Francis Drake right across from Marin Catholic. I know Mom and Dad wanted us to go to Catholic school there, but we moved to Phoenix in the late 60s. And so I grew up in Phoenix for all intents and purposes. Went to college.
And your parents owned a Good Earth restaurant right here in Phoenix, right? If anybody's been around long enough to remember Good Earth, but we had them in Marin County and they had them in Phoenix too.
Mom and Dad were the original health food guys.
Yes.
I mean, I rebelled because we never got to eat chocolate or anything. Carob. So that was my rebellion, being a junk food guy for a while. But that was a wonderful deal. They worked so hard. Of course, all the kids work there too. So I learned a lot about business and life. And with the Good Earth, we had one in Tempe on Mill Avenue and one in Thomas.
That reminds me, because you're not joking when you never got into drugs and everything, but for you, rebellion was go eat some chocolate. Highland Slobodkin raised his kids organic, and I remember the first church potluck we had, somebody brought a ham. And when Highland wasn't looking, his son Israel, his only son, ran up and got a whole plate full of ham and started eating it. Now, Israel's never done drugs or anything either. He's a real successful guy, but just to eat that ham, we were watching his as Christina says, he was making his testimony in those days.
The freedom of Christ, right? That's funny. That's funny. Oh, I love it.
So where'd you go to school and all?
So I went to St. Thomas, and I just figured this out about the last 10 years. St. Thomas on 24th Street, but when my folks would run out of money or something, then I'd go over to Kachina, which was 44th Street, and it's Scottsdale School. So I go back and forth. I never could figure it out why, but I had dear friends from both schools, and we're still friends. We get together all the time, friends from kindergarten and first grade. We hang out, but I went to Girard Catholic High School, and that's closed since too. That was on Oak Street. But after that, a breath of fresh air, went to Oral Roberts in Tulsa.
And Oral Roberts was booming in those days, wasn't it?
It was. It was from all over the world. People came. It was a lovely experience. Yeah, it was really cool.
And how did you decide you wanted to become a lawyer?
Well, that's a good question. After college, I spent a year in Port-au-Prince, Haiti as a missionary. And when I came back, broke, student loans, not really wanting to work, a corporate job. I got a job it was called Beatrice Foods, and I was going to be a salesman. This was after my mission, living
Yeah.
the life of a avant-garde life.
And Haiti was very, very poor in those days. It's still very, very poor. But what was your experience like as a just out of college, middle class kid living in that kind of poverty?
So the poverty was there, but the violence and the disarray was not. It was ruled by Papa Doc Duvalier, then his son. So it was safe, but it was extremely poor. But it was invigorating for me to be able to share and help people. And I helped a person who was our maid give birth to her baby because she had no access to hospitals.
Wow.
It was called the Merck Manual, and I'm reading that, and I'm going, "Oh my gosh, we got to cut the cord." Where, so.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So let me pause on that thought for just a moment, Bill, because obviously Papa Doc Duvalier, is that how you say his last name?
Mm-hmm.
He was a bad guy in a lot of ways, but he kept order in the society. And a lot of times, if the United States, we want to just like help this country, so we're going to get rid of this bad guy leader. And whether it's Gaddafi in Libya or Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and sometimes we open up the door for the devil without even realizing it because they're not quite ready for the kind of democracy we take for granted, are they?
Reminds me of the Ayatollah in Iran.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to get so current, but yeah, it's a shame. It's a real shame, and it was terrible because Haiti had was a caste system. The French were there. They lived up on this hill, and we lived in a place called Cité Soleil, which was the dump, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't have that unchecked violence because if someone was to steal or take your car or whatever, they'd be possibly killed.
For that. Yeah, right.
So it's, I was safe there, but that's a great point, Mark, and it's troubling as a patriot and a Christian and a thinker and an evangelical to think about how many disappointing wars there have been, probably trying to do the right thing, but not realizing that we can't impose our values on other societies, other religious cultures, other economic systems, a whole bit.
So, Bill, you did a little bit with Beatrice Foods, and you thought, I gotta have more of a future than this, huh?
I lasted one day.
One day?
They gave me a car, and
that's called being a flake, Bill.
It's called being a flake. And I said, Dad, so anyway, that was the question. What are you going to do now? I couldn't do it. They gave me this box of jelly in a squeeze bottle. Jelly had just come out instead of, and I said, what? I went to 4 years of college for this? So I said, yeah, thank you. Anyway, my dad said, well, you got to do something. So it was either law school or MBA. And I chose law school because my great-great-granddad, my great-granddad, my granddad, my dad wasn't a lawyer. He was a professor, but we had him in the family. And it was kind of an easy thing to do just in terms of, I didn't have anything else to do. So
you went to U of A. You became a lawyer. How tough was law school? And did you know that you were on the right track when you got out?
Law school is a mind game as much as it is like intellectually difficult. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of thinking. It's a lot of challenging, but I really loved it. I always worked in the library in undergrad, and I always worked in the library at law school. And I loved the reading, and I loved it. So for someone who likes to read and think, it's not that challenging. Any job is challenging to do it right.
Yeah.
And then, Mark, as you know, if you're in Hollywood, you're going to be an entertainment lawyer. If you're in Oklahoma, you're going to be a oil and gas lawyer. If you're in New York, a finance lawyer. If you're in Arizona, you're going to be a real estate lawyer. So that's just what I did,
So, what's funny? I just got a text from my friend Kai Adler, who lives in San Diego, and he says a friend of his is getting squeezed out of an inheritance in Arizona. They're trying to cut him out of the real estate deals. And do you know any real estate attorneys that'll work on a contingency basis? And I said, well, I'll check, but I think contingency is oftentimes determined by strength of the case. If the case is real strong, an attorney would be glad to do it for 30% or whatever. Right. But if it's weak, that's a whole different ballgame.
Twofold. One, I think there are some prohibitions on not only in divorce law, but in probate law for contingencies. I think so, but
Mhm.
I'm happy to talk to Kai. Second, commercial contingency cases were unheard of when I started. And when I started, this was during the original late 1980s real estate crash, which was a precursor to 208. But I would represent guys for $30, $40 an hour and 10% of their upside. It was no
Really?
problem. I was happy to pay my mortgage, so I really became a well-known guy for a while taking contingency cases, commercial contingency cases. It was
And you
really
can do real well on that if you win,
yeah,
right?
the big boys do really well on it. Like when you get a
Yeah.
securities fraud case and you sue some company for material misrepresentations and stuff, the big guys make a lot of money.
So one of the things about being a lawyer that's got to be rough is that people invite you into their lives at the messiest moment, right? Like we had the one time that I had to hire you, our daughter had a child and there was a custody battle with the father. They weren't married. It was very painful for us as a family. And we were, uh, being taken to court and we needed a lawyer. I never wanted to have to do that, but there we were.
Yeah.
How difficult is it for you emotionally to get involved in situations that are very emotional for your clients?
So when it's a believer, it's doubly hard. And I've never marketed myself in the Christian publications or media as a Christian lawyer. I've just said I'm going to be the best lawyer I can and the chips will fall where they may. But frequently I'll get believers and it just breaks my heart because just like you're saying, the emotional aspect of it and the fact that we do have a higher standing and a higher calling and we are supposed to be above reproach in everything we do. So that's a real tough one. And folks who are in the world who are sophisticated, um, for many of them, it's just part of the cost of doing business. I'm going to sue someone or I'm going to get sued. So in commercial litigation, it's not as emotional as divorce or maybe a serious personal injury and those type of things. But in commercial litigation, it can be, I mean, you have cases where a company could just completely end if you lose the lawsuit. So in that sense, I think I have a little bit of a gift to help people use common sense, compromise. A bad settlement is better than a good lawsuit, that type
Right.
of thing. But yeah, it's tough. And the older I get, the more I'm entwined with a person's problems, believe it or not. When I was younger, I just wanted to get it over with, get a little bit of money and go on the next one. But now
Yeah,
you
yeah.
see, yeah,
Well,
so.
because you can feel their pain. Your heart's been tenderized. And,
Mhm.
the what I found as a pastor getting involved in, messy, marriage deals or whatever, the things that were hardest on me is when I seemed to care more about the outcome of this marriage reconciliation than the people I'm counseling. I'm worried more about their kids and how it's going to
Right.
affect the kids than they are, and I'm staying up at night,
Yeah.
and that's I've had to grow up and realize that God even uses people's failures for good in the long run. He'll chastise them or
But
or but it's rough though, isn't it?
it's rough. How do you muster the energy to, and don't take this wrong, because we're both in the business of caring, but how do you muster the energy to care sometimes when, let's say they've been at it for 3 years, you met with them 20
Yeah.
times, how do you muster that energy?
Well, for me, my counseling ministry is pretty brief. People show up, they tell me their story, I lay it out there, and most of the time I never see them again because I just cut to the chase. I'm not getting paid for this. I mean, I may be their pastor or I might be a referral, but I don't do a bunch of psychoanalysis. I'm
Okay.
I'm I'm like you. We're practical, down to earth. It's not rocket science.
Yeah,
You're going to need to forgive. You're going to
yeah,
need to recognize that you've got some ownership in this dispute. It's not
mhm,
all the other person most of the
mhm.
time, not every time, but most of the time. And I just I'll just tell you a typical I'm doing pre-marriage counseling with this couple. They want me to do their wedding. And I asked them, one of the first questions is, have you ever been married before? Because that's a big issue. And
Right.
I don't want to remarry somebody who's running away from a previous spouse. And this one guy says, yeah, I've been married before. And I said, well, could you might tell me what's happened. Now, I hate to do this. That's the
Right.
last thing I want to do when I'm meeting somebody for the very first time, right? But I have to do it. So could you tell me? And he says, well, I was married, but man, she got so heavy. I just couldn't believe it. And then I'm looking at the girl he wants to marry. She's busting out of her jeans already, and she's never even had a kid. And it's like, oh, great. You got the wrong guy to do your wedding. I'm telling you right now.
That's a great story. That's funny. Oh, goodness. Goodness,
So,
goodness.
yeah, and you and I were involved in a situation where there was a church and they were having a dispute, and there were 400 or 500 people in the church.
Yeah.
And I brought the pastor to you, trying to help him see that he needed to submit to the elders, even though the elders are not a perfect group of men.
Right.
And he was fighting against their authority on the basis of a technicality,
Yep.
like, well, the bylaws say there needs to be 7 elders and there's only
Right.
6 because one
Right.
of them resigned. And I'm trying to say, time out. What is God saying? God's
Right.
telling you to submit to the elders,
Right.
not to get around their authority by a
Right.
technicality. And that one kept me up at night.
Yeah, Mark, I drive by that church on my way to work when I'm in Phoenix, and it just breaks my heart because of the
Yeah.
lack of humbleness and the lack of wisdom, and it still breaks my heart.
Yeah,
You
and because it was like they split the church, like,
Yeah.
Solomon said, when they were arguing about whose baby it was, cut the baby in half. And as soon as he said that, one of the mothers said, no, no, she can have the baby. And the other
Right.
said, oh, no, cut it in half. And then he knew who the real mother was
Exactly.
immediately.
Exactly.
And they
Exactly.
were willing to split the church. And
Yep.
once I realized they're willing to split the church, it just broke my heart. And sure enough,
Yep.
that's what happened.
It's what
2/3
happened.
of the people left. Many of them are still grieving about what they lost.
Yeah.
And that's 28 years ago or something
Yep.
like that. Um,
Mark, one of the themes I learned as a young believer was finishing the race. Ironic, the guy that discipled me didn't finish the race, but he pounded that in. And I would look at since 1972, since I follow the Lord, why do people fall away from Christ? And one of the reasons is they get hurt by their church. That's a big, out of the top 3 or 4, that's a big one.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for that, because I had a buddy I was taking to church in Laguna Beach, and he was coming every Sunday. He was doing really well, and he stopped coming. I said, why'd you stop coming? He goes, because the pastor didn't know my name. I said, wait a minute. This guy's got 400 people in his church. You expect him to know your name? He knows your face. He said, hey,
Yeah.
buddy, whatever. And he goes, I've introduced myself to him 2 or 3 times, and he didn't know my name, and I could tell,
Yeah.
and he's never coming back.
Yeah.
So that concept of the church being perfect, it just doesn't exist.
It doesn't
And,
exist.
we all try our hardest. We all make mistakes. And so,
Well, and the closest and most true analogy for a church is family, right?
Mhm.
Tell me a family where the family doesn't hurt each other.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it's a totally different story, but we had a memorial service last Saturday in Santa Rosa, California, for my half brother who died. Okay. Me and my brothers are paying for the service. I have a second memorial service later that afternoon, so I needed to move things along. And I said to the waitress, could you go ahead and serve the salads, because we're going to eat and then we're going to have our talk. And one of my sisters said, no, we're not going to serve the salads right now because not everybody's here yet. And I didn't want to have a big fight with her in front of
Right.
a bunch of people that are just meeting me and her for the very first time. But that's family. So we waited 15 minutes, and then I went ahead and I said, we're serving the salads,
Yeah,
And
that's
it was, but I've been yelled at, cursed at by my own family
Yeah.
many, many times,
Yeah. Yeah.
Send my brother his portion of this $800 restaurant bill. He's not paying. You know what I mean? He's just not. My other brother, oh,
You know.
I left my credit card in the car. Well, go get it, for crying out loud. Don't
Can
be
you
lame.
zoom in? Oh my gosh. It reminds me of the old couple who had raised their kids, put all three of their sons through college. One was a lawyer, one was a doctor, one was an engineer. They'd worked their tails off. They turned 90. They go, hey, we want to go to Florida for a little vacation. They call the lawyer's son. They go, son, can you give us $5,000? We worked our entire life and we want a vacation before we die. The lawyer says, no, I just got a new boat and I can't do it. And so they call the doctor and, hey, son, we put you through school. We sacrificed everything. And could you possibly give us $5,000 so we can go to Florida before we pass away? And he says, no, my wife and I just expanded the house and this and that. We don't have any money. And they call the engineer and they say, they said, can you give us $5,000? Your brothers can't. And Nate goes, no, we can't either. We're in trouble right now at the business and we're having trouble making payroll. Sorry, we can't do it. So the dad gets him on a conference call and he says, hey guys, I go, Mom and I sacrificed everything. We wanted this vacation and we gave every possible thing we could. Never had vacations. Every penny went to you guys, but I just wanted to let you know we never had the money to get a marriage license. And do you know what that makes you? And the mom goes, yeah, and cheap ones at that.
So, and I want to stay on this theme for just a minute. Churches can be painful because they're filled with imperfect people, whether it's the pastors or whoever. And following Jesus is painful. He says, pick up your cross. And so is family. In your family, you've had to persevere through really difficult times. And because you've persevered, your kids are flourishing today. And that may or may not have been the case if you had said, I'm out of here. Yeah. I'm done with this. Could you tell us some of the background of your kids?
So I have 4 sons. They're all married. I have 7 grandchildren. I have a daughter who's not married yet, but she seems to be seeing a nice young man.
You have 3 sons, Bill.
3 sons,
Unless I don't know about one of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 2 of the boys had pretty significant problems in high school and part of college. Billy, the kid that's a full-time missionary, he's been sober 11 years, but he actually got kicked out of his fraternity. And when the president of fraternity called me and he said, Mr. Miller, everybody loves Billy. He's the nicest kid. He's a great athlete. He's good looking. He goes, but we drink on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. He drinks every night. Anyway, it was those type of things. But he's thriving now, thank God. Mark, who we just tried our first case together up in Prescott, he's a lawyer barred in Florida and California, and he's in the process of getting Arizona. So one of my sons is going to practice with me now a lot more than before.
And when he was in high school, he was so problematic. We thought he was going to die because he kept getting infections because he got, he was doing things he shouldn't have been doing. And
Yep. Mark was in military school. Mark was in wilderness camp and ended up getting a GED because he, couldn't stay in high school without getting booted. But eventually the Lord got a hold of him again about 10 years ago and did very well at Baylor, went on to law school at Idaho and got plugged in with Doug Wilson and the church up there and has been just a model citizen since. So praise God.
Congratulations.
And as a father, as a father, Mark, and you know this, you grieve for their pain, but the last thing you do is think about quitting. The last thing you do is think about yourself. Maybe that's our Catholic background or something, but to me, never an option. Not once. Never an option. That we'll fight through this and we'll do what we can and we'll keep our eye on the cross. So I think that to me that was I don't even need a pat on the back. It wasn't difficult. It's what you do.
Well, and you did have to fight. You had to fight for the souls of your sons. You had to fight to preserve your family. And yet that's what Christ called us to do. We don't get to, when he says pick up our cross, we don't get to choose how we lay down our life. We can choose to lay down our life or we can choose to run away or bail or quit. But we don't get to choose the cup. Jesus said, I have a cup to drink. And they're all like, well, we'll do that too. And he goes, basically, you're going to have your own cup to drink. Just be faithful in that suffering. I didn't get to choose that my son would die. I didn't. I got to choose to move to Arizona to keep him alive for another 8 years. But I didn't get to choose that. I know though that if we are willing to stay faithful through whatever pain God brings us through, then great and wonderful things happen.
Yeah.
We're never forsaken. We're never ultimately ashamed. Um,
Yeah, that's right, Mark. And it is such an important lesson that some intellectual or media personality was criticizing kind of the Oprah Winfrey, you know, Oprah Winfrey-nation of America, where everybody's
uh,
now, it's my pain and my suffering and my this and my that and my counseling. And it's never about others. I don't think your grandpa, your dad, my grandpa, my dad, I don't think it was the same thing. I think they were more duty driven. Like, hey,
mhm.
I'm a father. Hey, I'm a soldier. I'm going to World War II. I'm not asking questions. I'm going. And that balance is to me, not even difficult. Because if I wake up tomorrow and say, I'm sick of whatever, then I'm abandoning my duty to my church, to my family name, to my children, to my grandchildren, and such. And it's a real good way to keep your life on track to some degree. And when we
Amen.
had our marital problems,
Amen.
it was the same thing. Of course, it's brutal, and you cry and you lose sleep and you whine and everything. But the few things you don't do is not show up to work. You don't miss church. You don't miss prayers. And when you lose your temper, you say, I'm sorry, I'm hurt, I'm whatever, but you just keep going. And
Yeah.
you realize that it's a duty. Being a
Amen.
man is a duty, in my
Amen.
opinion.
That's right, Bill. That's right. And the tragedy is a lot of people quit going to church. And if you want an excuse to quit going, you can have an excuse. There will be an issue that comes up. It's just not if, it's just a matter of when. Just like if you want to bail on your family, you'll
Yeah,
get offended by your family and you
right.
have choice. But most people stay with their family to one degree or another. Not everybody does. A lot
Yeah,
of people are living in isolation, and that's pretty darn lonely after a
yeah,
while.
yeah,
And same with
yeah,
friendship. I
yeah,
think a lot of men have trouble. You mentioned that you have some of the same friends from grammar school. So do I. When I was
yeah,
in California, I met with two guys I went to high school with. One guy was in from junior high, guys from our church over 50 years ago.
yeah,
Have we ever offended each other? Oh, yeah, we have. Have
yeah,
we ever thought, I don't know if this relationship's worth it? Yeah. But when it's all said and done, if I eliminate everybody who offends me, pretty
right.
soon it's just me and you. And then I got to get rid of you because you're going to do something. And then I'm all alone again.
Exactly, exactly. That's well said. That's well said.
So when it comes to the law, Jesus said something that's interesting. He said, um, if your brother is taking you to court, or I know he says your adversary, settle with your adversary on the way to court, lest he turn you over to the judge and you have to pay every last cent.
Right,
Now, you would have thought he would have said, God is sovereign, God
right,
puts authorities in place. So if you ever have to go to court because some enemy or an adversary, trust God, it's
right,
all going to work out just fine. That's
right,
not what he says
right,
to his disciples.
right.
Why do you think Jesus said, settle with your adversaries?
Let me say this. I think we have 10,000 lawyers in the state of Arizona, active ones, or maybe more, maybe 15 now, something like that. Just a small handful of us actually to go to trial in front of a jury for a case, for a civil case. Get
Hmm.
quite a lot of criminal lawyers will be in court all the time for different crimes, but to take a case to a jury, civil trial in excess of six figures is pretty rare. Go to the biggest law firms downtown, they have 100 lawyers, they have 5 of them who do that. I've had 6 jury trials since COVID ended. I was the first one back after COVID ended. Juries in Arizona, they're very tight, first of all, with the money, but they have a very good bunch of common sense for their decisions. And I very seldom have ever been surprised. They win, lose, or draw, they typically get the facts right. When the Lord said that, I think what he was referring to was the fact that a judge, a single person, has a bias. a single person can do something that maybe a group of people won't do. And
Hmm.
I think the Lord was saying, as much as anything, avoid court, avoid confrontation, avoid trouble, but also don't put your trust in one person because it could be a disaster. And the few
Hmm.
times I've lost sleep at night or had a real big setback, it wasn't because of something a jury said. It was because a judge did something that either I was missing or maybe the judge was missing, but you don't want to put your trust in one particular source is what I would say.
Yeah.
And I always tell my clients it's a little more expensive, a little more troublesome, but you go talk to 8 jurors, 6 of them will get it right.
Yeah.
So
So another situation that I've been involved in recently is another church dispute. My friend and you know Al Els, who had a lot of
sure.
wisdom and a lot of
Yeah.
grace and helped a lot of us through messy situations when we needed wisdom and counsel. Al died recently. Well, this church was trying to reach Al. They needed a wise counselor to help them mediate dispute in their staff, between their pastors and staff. And so they ended up with me because Al's in heaven. Second, second choice to say the least. And but in this dispute, one of the parties is threatening to sue the church if the church doesn't give them this extensive, um, you know, reimbursement, basically a payout for something that was said to uh, the family. Maybe it wasn't appropriate what was said, but it was said not in malice, but in just in an inquisitory way. In
Yeah.
other words, they were just asking a question about something. Now they're threatening to sue. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 says, don't take your brother to
Right.
court because
Amen.
it's a shame.
Amen.
It's better to be defrauded than to go
Amen.
before unbelievers.
Right.
Um, and yet here it is, Christians doing that all the time. It's just so
Mark,
very sad.
to my knowledge, have never done it. Once in a while, you're here. We went to church together and this or that. But to my knowledge, I just try to take a pass when it's two believers. You and I had a deal years ago where the guy had come to me. He was frustrated. He worked for a nonprofit and he wanted to sue him. And he had a pretty compelling story. He was a pretty fast talker. I was a young lawyer. I came to you and I said, this guy's kind of upset with his nonprofit, but it was a Christian nonprofit.
Right.
And you reminded me of that scripture and said, don't touch it with a 50-foot pole. And I always remember that I don't care how bad it is. And that includes, there are ways when outrageous things happen in churches, there are ways to get those resolved without resorting to the court. There are private mediations. You can do things
Yes,
confidentially, but to take that in a public display is a mockery, especially amongst believers.
that's
You
right.
know, these
Yep, yep. And
so
and in the case you were mentioning, the guy violated the agreements with, you're not supposed to go and solicit from trustees in
yeah,
the,
yeah,
solicit side business, and he was
yeah,
doing that. And the violation, they said, sorry, you're not going to work for us
yeah,
anymore. And then he
yeah,
wants to sue him.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I said to him right to his face, I said, you might as well sue Jesus as to sue this guy because this is a this is a godly
yeah.
Christian
Good people. Yeah,
organization
yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but unfortunately, people, the love of money is a root of all sorts of
yeah,
evil. And
yeah,
there's a big lawsuit going on in Texas at a megachurch where the pastor had to go to prison. And then because he went to prison, for child molestation that he did years and years ago. They were involved in this. Then the church decided they're not gonna give him a multi-million-dollar retirement, right?
yeah.
He was just gonna get $1 million
Yeah, I would
retirement, but
think,
not
yeah. Can
multi-million.
make sense.
But
Yeah.
then he decides to sue the church, and so they take depositions, and the deposition ended up getting another megachurch pastor fired in Colorado Springs. It was so sad. It was
Mm.
like, it's like an explosion. If there's an explosion of evil, then a lot of people get hurt all
Yeah.
over the place.
Always better to walk in those situations. That I think I know the guy you're talking about. I mean, walk.
Walk.
There was there's more than one story of a guy who walked on those type of things and just work a normal job and let the Lord restore you. It has a
Yeah,
lot more dignity than
that's
suing,
right. That's exactly
It's
right.
called dirty money.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. So, Bill, when a client comes to you and they're in a dispute, you've been involved in law long enough to know that there's usually two sides. What do you say to somebody who says, "I want you to represent me and I want justice, etc." When you can sense right away that it's probably a losing case, the guy's, even from what he tells you, you're not buying his story and he's
Yeah.
a potential client. How do you handle that?
Well, I'm trying to think of a recent example. I'm not sure if I can't be, I probably shouldn't say it. It is public record, but it was a gal who had talked a guy into giving her his house. And, when I laid down with her what the issue will be in front of a jury and how bad this looks, you got to get this resolved because the old guy's family was ticked. She got pissed at me and went to the bar and yak, yak, yak. She got a new lawyer, but part of my job is to tell what I think is the truth. Now, I would
That's right.
obviously never break any confidences or anything. But the issue to me is you have to be a truth teller. That doesn't mean that you can't utilize a statute of limitations or a faulty service of process, or there's procedural things that you can work with. But like you say, there's two sides to every story, then there's the truth. And I think part of our job is to try to get in that middle ground somewhere. And that's another reason the Lord said settle before you go to the courthouse steps, because
Yeah.
this could be devastating.
That's right.
So,
You
so
might
I'm
not get the judgment you really think you
right,
deserve.
right, exactly.
And there's such a loss, not only of reputation, but people don't realize you go to court for a trial, you're going to lose a lot of sleep over it, right? You're going
Well,
to lose a lot of productive work time over it because you're going to
I
be focused on something that's a battle rather than being more productive with your future.
I learned it in the late '90s on the big recession. The guys that were obsessed with their lawsuit, and that's all they did, was manage their lawsuit, get documents organized, get witness statements, talk to their lawyer. They never bounced back. The guys that just said, "Handle it. I'm being sued for everything I have. I don't care. I'm going to do another deal." The guys that focused on business, down the line, they all bounced back.
Yeah,
I could name names right now of guys that
really.
said, "I don't care about it. Yeah, they're going to get a judgment, whatever.
Yeah,
I'm going to go make money." And I tell entrepreneurs that I say, this is a full-time job. You don't want this. You're going to make
yeah,
more money doing your business than you are in this lawsuit. And California's an exception. Guys, the laws in California are so different, especially in personal injury and such. But commercial litigation in Arizona, very seldom does someone walk out of there happy,
yeah,
because the
yeah,
guy files bankruptcy, or the guy
yeah,
is you can't find where his assets are. There are a million reasons that you should settle.
yeah,
Million,
yeah.
million.
I remember Wayne McKellop saying when I called him forward, and I think you were one of the lawyers I called forward in church one Sunday to discuss this briefly with the church. Wayne said, in every lawsuit, there's three losers and one winner. The loser loses, the loser's attorney loses, the winner loses, and the winner's attorney wins. So there's one happy person
He
out
got
of
that
the
right.
four
He got
parties,
that.
you know.
He got that right. He got that right.
So, Bill, you're living in Laguna. You're practicing law in California and in Arizona,
Just
or
in Arizona.
just in
Yeah,
Arizona.
yeah.
Um, what do you feel are some of the biggest concerns you have for the United States? You're a patriot. You're a believer. Um, your eyes are wide open. What are some of the biggest concerns you have for our country right now?
Well, thanks for asking that. I did want to get your thoughts on AI too. I think the war in Iran is a disaster. Someone was speaking at CPAC today. I didn't recognize the guy's name, but he kind of threw out the war. And this is CPAC.
Yeah,
These are my
Conservative
people.
Political Action Committee. Yeah.
They're screaming impeachment for what Trump has done in Iran. And so I think that's a grave mistake. I think it's going to totally cost the right side of the aisle the midterms. And so many enthusiastic young people who believe Trump's promise of no more wars and stuff are disillusioned right now. So I think I do think it's a spiritual war, and I think socialism creeping into New York is problematic. I think you have a whole generation of young people who are super disillusioned, and their opportunities are maybe becoming marginalized because of AI and because of some of the displacement that will cause. Um, I I think we've done a pretty poor job as Christians, evangelical Christians, opening our doors from the diversity line. Some of us try harder. You guys try hard with some of your outreaches, but I think, so I think those kind of issues are problematic. And
Hmm.
where we go from here, I just don't know. I don't know.
I
A lot of
I
disillusionment.
I listened to a really interesting podcast, and I'm going to send you that Highland Slobodkin sent out about the war, and I'll just give you one summary statement. It's from an Israeli guy. He says that he doesn't think the war is really so much America coming to Israel's aid to fight against their enemy, Iran. He thinks the war is really about the battle between United States and China. That China has they had established a relationship with Venezuela and with Iran to get sanctioned oil at a discount, and that their long-term goal is to dominate Asia completely and maybe the world someday. And the only way they can do that is if they have a reliable oil source in the Middle East, like Iran. And so they want that Iranian dependency on them, and that we realize that is an underlying issue. Now, I don't know that President Trump is thinking along these lines. I think he sort of got dragged into it because the Venezuela operation was so successful, almost supernaturally successful, that he thought maybe it'll be successful like that in Iran, knock out the leader, and everybody's going to cheer for America. But I think we have two very intractable forces coming together. One intractable force is the Ayatollah, and the Iranian leadership realizes that if they capitulate to the United States and there's regime change in Iran, their own people are going to kill them, which is probably true. When they do regime change in the Middle East, just like when the Shah got kicked out, um, his army didn't fight the Ayatollah's people. They could have killed the demonstrators in the street back then.
Right.
They
Right.
didn't, and then they were all killed by the Ayatollah
Right.
afterwards.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so we have President Trump, who says he never loses and never backs down and never says he's sorry for anything, coming against a force that will not be defeated unless they're dead, practically. The closest thing in modern history really is the Japanese and their emperor worship. And if it wasn't for the atomic bomb, we would have probably lost 1 million soldiers going into Japan, because most of those guys believed the lie that America was going to kill them all. So anyway, it's going to be, in my opinion, a very humbling situation. So let's shift to AI. And the United States has to be prepared. We have been spoiled. We've been spoiled, in my opinion. Even to this day, we still have only 4% unemployment and less than 3% inflation. Now, that's going to change, in my opinion, whether it's AI, gasoline, or and the ripple effect of an overextended in-debt economy that's now approaching $40 trillion worth of debt.
Right.
We've got problems coming down the line. AI, because of its potency, because China's totally into it, the rest of the world's into it, we have to develop it, but there needs to be safeguards. I was
Right.
really disappointed when Anthropic was attacked by the Trump administration because they wanted safeguards to make sure that their AI system would not surveil all Americans and gather all the information, which it
Right.
literally has the capacity to do. And
Yeah.
the second safeguard that our Defense or Department of War wanted in place, they said that they didn't want their AI being used for robots and drones that would operate without human agency. In other
Right.
words, they still wanted people responsible because ultimately they don't want to release some robot army that could do whatever the heck it wants to do.
Is
Those
it
seem like pretty reasonable
Yeah, very reasonable.
restrictions.
It's like there's an AI Act in the EU that has similar type of provisions, and
Yeah.
we should probably just adopt that. I haven't read it, but is it true that I can't remember Trump's wife's name, Melania or whatever her name is.
Melania, yeah.
Melania got on yesterday with a robot and said robots should replace teachers, or was that a?
I don't know because I saw the picture of her with the robot, but I didn't read the
I
article.
can't believe that. It would make me sick to my stomach if that wasn't just some fake, AI.
I would be cautious to believe
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But
It can't be true. There's no
um,
way. I
my
mean,
daughter's involved with international companies and HR departments, and she says the use of AI is so embedded in every major company right now. My brother works for Wells Fargo, and AI, basically, he says that he's a computer behind the scenes guy in the bank, in one of the biggest banks in the world, and he says that when he has to compile spreadsheets and cross-check them, what used to take him 8 hours to do, he can now have AI. He has to do the right prompts. You still have to know the business well enough to know how to direct the AI, but it's 2 hours to produce something more accurate than he could have done in 8 hours before.
well,
Um, yeah,
I'm not do believe in things like that. There's virtue and any type of a closed data system where like AI playing chess. I mean, there's only so many chess moves they can make, so they're going to win. What I'm concerned about, the Lennox book, John Lennox, who's a brilliant intellectual. I love this guy, but he has a book about God, AI, and history. I'm concerned about the lack of guardrails and what they call supercomputing.
right.
Like right now is Zitron. Have you ever seen him? He's a journalist from London. I think he might live in San Francisco now, but
Are you
Ed
talking
Zit.
about quantum computing that's coming
No, I'm
as the
really
next?
talking about AI right now is based on language.
Yeah,
So basically, it's a language model, to my understanding. I'm not trying to speak out of my knowledge base here, but if you ask AI, how do I do a rose garden? It has
right,
3 or 4 sources. Get the
right.
soil. Ask it something like, how do I win chess on it's same thing.
Yeah,
It's still going out with language and coming
right,
back at different levels. Supercomputing is what everyone's afraid of because then it starts to think for itself.
right.
And that's when the guardrails need to be in place, because if it can think for itself, what if it's nefarious? Like what if it's not, doesn't have the conscious that a human being has, or doesn't have the goodwill that a human being has, or whatever. So all of a sudden this entity, the supercomputer, is thinking for itself. Well, how long before it says I'm going to be malicious?
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
fear.
right.
And or in the hands of a malicious person. Like right now, if you ask AI on Sheepy Chat or whatever, hey, how do I steal from my neighbor without him knowing? He's always on vacation. It's probably going to hopefully come up with something that says we won't answer that, whatever. But what if I say, well, hypothetically, I have a neighbor who's always on
Yeah.
vacation in July, and hypothetically, he has some
System, how
nuclear,
do I
you know
get
what I
in
mean?
there?
You can,
Yeah.
so
Right.
somehow we've got to get these guardrails. But the one that Lennox and those guys are worried about is when the systems start to think for
Yeah.
themselves.
Right.
And that's,
And that's happening. And that is and why we should have concern is because Sam Altman from OpenAI and Elon Musk and all those guys, they're concerned. I remember a year
uh,
ago, they started coming out and they were really worried about the
yeah,
future. And when those guys worry, and they're not worried because they're worried about making too much money, they're worried because of the very thing you're talking about. And there is a phrase for what you're talking about, and I forget what it is, but it's when the computers are thinking for
yeah,
themselves.
that's like the
It
layman's term is super intelligence. I can't remember what it was,
yeah. We
but
should ask ChatGPT. I ask it things all the time
well,
because
the Pope just came out and said that he doesn't want his priests using it.
really,
I found that hard to believe because I think when it hits theological databases and legal databases, it does
it's
a pretty
very
good job.
good. It
Yeah,
does a really good job.
I mean, you still have to edit it and
Oh
figure
yeah,
out,
you gotta. If I say, give me 3 scriptures about how the blood of Jesus cleanses us from our
It comes
sin.
in pretty good.
It and I can come up with 3 or 4 myself. It'll
Right.
come up with the same 3 or 4, or maybe it'll think of one that I hadn't thought of, but
Right.
it's really, really good at that.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, I think the Pope said doesn't want him doing it, and I'm not sure why, because in my business, it's not there yet. In my business, it probably gets at about it's great for writer's block. It's wonderful to spit in the facts or whatever,
Yeah,
and then it's a good start. But if you just try to repeat it, it's not
right.
there yet.
Well,
So,
I actually, so the way I look at it at this point, Bill, it's sort of like the internet. The internet provides tremendous resources and services. It allows us to do what we're doing right now, which is a remote podcast, but it's also provided, you know, access to pornography
yeah,
worldwide, and
yeah,
everything mankind does is corrupted by the sin nature. Now, does
and
that mean we should get rid of all tools or engines or whatever? No, it just means that in this case, we have a warning that this one is going to be more potent, more dangerous, more
yeah.
deadly than
Yeah.
ever. And if we don't have leaders that are willing to put guardrails in place, and right now, it doesn't seem like we do have leaders that
No, I
want
don't think so.
guardrails in
I
place.
don't think
We
so.
need to pray for that because
Yeah.
um, the problems that could be unleashed could be of a
Yes.
magnitude that we've never experienced before.
There's a group up in Sand Hill Road or Silicon Valley somewhere, but I think it's called Act 17, and they've got some believers who are all brilliant tech people. And I think they debate these type of things. But I'm with you. And when Elon Musk and Sam Altman, these kind of guys are saying we need some guardrails, and the administration and Congress just seems to ignore it. So
Yeah, well, we have a problem right now.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
gonna I'm asking chat right now. Um, when AI, what's it called when AI thinks for itself? Yeah, we're just about done here. It's called Artificial General Intelligence,
yeah,
AGI,
yeah,
Artificial General or Autonomous AI.
yeah. That
Okay.
that that's the question. When it gets there, is it going to replace? Is it
It's
going
not
to?
gonna replace everybody any more than, I mean, people are still here's the thing. We still, like, you provide a service. You're willing to go to court. AI can't go to court for anybody. Now, will it eliminate some lawyer jobs? Yeah. Pastors still are gonna be praying for people. Carpenters are still gonna be building
Yeah,
houses.
yeah,
There are, photocopies things, I forget what they're called, but you can build a house to a certain extent with that.
uh,
Um, but
yeah,
the great majority of service professions, they'll
yeah.
be affected, but not necessarily all that negatively.
Yeah, no, I know, and they talk about college and the necessity of the university system and such, and we have Bible studies with the boys on Saturdays, Billy and Timmy and Mark, and I told them when I was a little kid, it was a given you either went to the university, the military, or trade school. Those were your 3 choices. That was it. Your kids, because of AI, might get a hybrid of those things
Yep.
because, the way things change and the way that you can get information so quick, and that, like you said, I'm calling it super intelligence. You get the proper term for it. Is that good? Is that bad? It's inevitable, I think. The
Yep, it
question is,
is.
how do we manage that? And what do we do with it? So,
Well, I want to just exhort our listeners before we hang up. Seek the Lord while he may be found.
yeah,
Grow in Christ. Get filled with the Holy Spirit. Take your devotionals every day. Stay faithful in your church. God's got a plan to use each and every one of us. Bill Miller, my dear friend, thanks so much for being my guest
okay,
today.
Mark. God bless. Have a great weekend.
God bless you. Give Andra my
Okay,
love.
I
Bye.
sure will. And Christina too.